In 2012, James Holmes destroyed a lot of lives in a matter of seconds, and to this day, he continues to be the reason as to why so many people will never ever go back to a movie theater. Do want to give a massive mental health warning at the start of this video. We're talking about a lot of sensitive topics, including mental illnesses, and today's case also involves a mass amount of victims and a lot of graphic injuries. If you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, and form, please skip this video. I totally understand. Your mental health matters the most. Take care of yourselves. I mean it. I love you. July 20th of 2012 was the nationwide release date in theaters for The Dark Knight Rises. It was the third movie and the end of one of the biggest trilogies in movie history. It was a big deal. One of the sold out showtimes for this premiere was in a theater in Aurora, Colorado at 12:05 a.m., just 5 minutes after midnight. People showed up to the theater hours before midnight because they were just that excited. July 20th was also a big day for James Holmes because that was the day that he decided to put his plan into action. And he specifically chose to do what he did at a movie theater because it made sense. It was full of people, which was important to him. It was full of random people, which was good because he had no connection to them. It was dark, it was loud, making it easier for him to hide. It had an exit door, allowing him to walk in and out in a matter of seconds. It was perfect for what he wanted to do. He had prepared ahead of time for that night by checking a few things off his list. He had actually been preparing for at least 4 months, purchasing things in person as well as getting a quote high volume of deliveries to his apartment, buying things such as masks, weapons, hair dye, protective gear, and purchasing one ticket for the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises. And when the day came, he felt good, he felt ready, he wasn't worried or panicked, he was instead extremely calm and collected. On July 20th, after midnight, 18 minutes into the movie, James entered movie theater 9 through the exit door, dressed head to toe in protective gear, helmet on, weapon in hand. One of the people in the theater who was sitting in the first couple of rows later said that he could not see James's face, but he could see his outline right in front of the movie screen. Not only his outline, but also the clear outline of the weapon that he had with him. James threw 2 items into the crowd that people heard making hissing sounds as they flew towards them, and then those went off. Some people described it to feel like fireworks, and within minutes, maybe seconds, the air around them was cloudy and they felt their lungs burning and their eyes burning, and then James used his weapons without holding back, sending every single person in that movie theater into a complete panic. After realizing that the loud banging sounds were not coming from the movie, but instead were happening in real life, some people's natural reactions was to jump and try and run and make it to the exit doors, but others were not moving fast enough, causing the people behind them to have no other option but to lay down on the ground, duck down, and rely on the seats to protect them. Popcorn was flying in the air sooner than later. Pieces of flesh were also flying in the air from the injuries. Bang after bang after bang. A pregnant woman was so badly injured she was trying to tend to her husband, the father of her baby, who had a horrible injury through his head, through his eyeball, making his face unrecognizable. Sitting in utter chaos, people yelling around her trying to decide if she should save herself to try and save her baby or save her husband to make sure that at least her baby grew up with a father. Another girl leaning over on the ground with tears streaming down her face, whispering to a stranger next to her, telling her that she thinks that her boyfriend is gone. Another young woman had been so badly injured that her intestines in her stomach fell out. She had to catch them with her hands and physically put them back in place, holding them in place, hoping a medical team would get to her before it was too late. A husband looking down at his wife and being able to see her brain matter exposed because of how badly she had been hurt. The lights still off, the movie still playing in the background throughout all of this, making it only harder for people to realize actually what was going on. And eventually a flood of 911 calls coming from not only inside, outside, but also from around the theater. Multiple officers and ambulances were dispatched. One of the officers calling for backup and another one calling at 1:27 a.m. to say, quote, bring as much crime scene tape as you can, end quote. Officers themselves driving victims to the hospitals in their cars because the amount of ambulances were not enough. All of that damage caused by one person, 24-year-old James Holmes. He surrendered himself to police officers outside of the theater within 7 minutes of the first 911 calls, and he was placed under arrest and taken into custody. Authorities at first, actually, when they first saw him, did not realize that he was the person they were looking for because he was covered in protective gear, head to toe dressed in black just like they were, and he was wearing a mask. But when they saw him trying to get into his car in the parking lot very calmly instead of rushing, helping people like everyone else was doing, they realized that his body language made him look like the only person that stood out, and he looked at them and then he smiled. His eyes were dark all around, they looked evil, and that's when they knew that it was him. 12 people left their homes that night to go to that movie premiere and never made it back. The oldest out of those 12 being 51 years old, the youngest being 6. Apart from those 12 people, an additional 70 people were badly injured. The following day, July 21st of 2012, many victims remained in the hospital undergoing either treatment or life-saving surgeries, while a group of law enforcement enforcement authorities and investigators surrounded James's apartment, where they found a plethora of homemade destructive devices, 10 gallons of gasoline, jars filled with volatile chemicals meant to go off if they were opened and triggered, a stereo system on a timer meaning to lure someone in when it started playing loud music. Amongst other things, James Holmes had set up his apartment, first of all, with the loud music so somebody would go up there and try to enter, and with so many different things and devices highly calculated, extremely unstable, and designed to cause major harm. He did that so that someone would enter his apartment, make everything go off, then taking his apartment building and making that a massive crime scene to use that as a distraction from the massive crime scene that he was about to cause himself at the movie theater. He wanted all of the police cars and ambulances to go there so he could do what he did in the movie theater without all the chaos of the authorities showing up. It took them 2 full days to make his apartment safe to enter and to safely disable everything. Back at the police station where James is now in custody and now being questioned, officers and investigators are stunned at just how calm and chilled out this guy looks. He's leaning back in his seat, the most monotone voice, no look of concern or actually anything at all for that matter behind his eyes. He talks only for a few minutes before asking for a lawyer, so he does not say much, but what he does tell him is about one thing that he mailed to his psychiatrist, a spiral notebook. He mailed it. It was addressed to Dr. Leanne Fenton, the University of Colorado psychiatrist that he had been seeing leading up to that night in July. Oh yeah, because by the way, 24-year-old James wasn't dumb by any means. He had gotten his degree in neuroscience in 2012 at the University of California, graduating with highest honors and at the top 1% of his class. And he was enrolled as a PhD student in neuroscience at the University of Colorado Medical Campus in Aurora. But in early June of 2012, the month prior to the crime, James dropped out of his studies completely without even really giving an explanation. But we're going to circle back around to that. But for now, this journal that he mailed to his former psychiatrist included all his detailed plans that he had written down prior to the night of July 20th. He had mailed it, but when it was found in the mail room, unopened. Some of the things in his journal read: what is the meaning of life? If you destroy all life, then there is no question to be asked. Targets, random. The cruel twist of fate are unkind to the misfortunate. Venue, airport, or movie theater. He also writes about how having one victim would be, quote, too personal, too much evidence, easily caught, end quote, and writes out his decision to target multiple victims all at once. There were drawings and diagrams of different theater rooms within the movie theater building. He was listing off pros and cons for each one, finally settling on Theater 9 and drawing out the layout, drawing out the floor plan. There were lists of ideas for maximizing the number of victims, notes about timing, entrances, and exits, and then sentences hinting to the movie premiere that he chose, writing, quote, love gone, motivation directed to hate and obsessions, no consequences, no fear, alone, isolated, no work for distractions, no reason to seek self-actualization, embraced the hatred, a dark night rises, end quote. Some people also believe the reason he colored his hair red was to resemble the Joker, although James himself has said that there was no correlation there. He also wrote about losing interest in life, about feeling like his brain and his mind were broken, and about the idea of becoming a quote-unquote force rather than a person. Needless to say, there was something clearly not right in his head and in his brain, and it turns out that his mental health had been declining for a while. On July 23rd of 2012, James Holmes made his first court appearance and was ordered to be held without bond. He was held in solitary confinement to protect him from other inmates. While he was awaiting trial, he was charged with upwards of 152 charges. His trial officially began in April of 2015, almost 3 years after the crime, but there was a lot of preparations from both sides leading up to it. The defense, of course, was going to be zoning in and focusing on his mental health. They were going to go with the insanity plea, arguing that he was in the middle of a severe psychotic break, calling up psychiatric experts to argue that James could not fully understand the morality of his actions, using his journal to say, look, he was delusional, he was experiencing hallucinations, etc., and he was clearly not in the right state of mind. Their point wasn't going to be trying to say that he didn't do it. They were trying to say that he was legally insane when he did do it, leading to hopefully finding him not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution, on the other hand, was also going to be using his journal, but their argument would be, look, it's written, it's drawn out by him, clear as day in black and white. This was carefully planned out. He put a lot of thought into doing what he set out to do. It was premeditated, and his intention and his motives are all right here. And he was aware of what he was doing. So that's what the main argument became. Was he insane at the time of the crime, or was he not? not, and should he be found criminally responsible for his actions. But even prior to the trial, it was delayed for so long for so many different reasons, like seeing if James would be fit to stand trial, evaluating his mental condition, then his team wanting to plead not guilty, but then wanting to plead guilty to avoid the harshest sentence, the prosecution finding more evidence that they wanted to be able to present in trial, investigators seizing even more evidence from his apartment and getting that admitted to be admissible in court, health delays making James unable to appear in court for the hearings, other hearings in which 911 calls and video recordings were presented to be able to use those in trial, then the jury selection in itself, that took 3 months. So many different things at play here, but the biggest topic of conversation was his mental health. James was born in San Diego, California to his parents, Robert and Arlene. He had a stable upbringing. He was raised by hardworking parents, and as a kid, he was described to be shy but polite and academically talented. He was a pretty introverted child, but he had always excelled in school from the time that he was little. Pretty much, he was always interested in science, math, computers, technology. Instead of playing with toy cars and stuffed animals or whatever, he was more than likely to play with puzzles and do things to learn new stuff. In high school, he remained a generally reserved kind of guy. He had a few close friends, but he continued to excel in academics. Some maybe described him as quiet and maybe a little odd, but nothing really alarming. In his college years, so from 2006 to 2010-ish, friends and teachers saw him as brilliant and intelligent, but a little bit socially awkward. It was towards his last year or two in college that he really started to become more withdrawn, and he seemed kind of a little bit paranoid at times. But it was really around late 2011, early 2012 when his mental health really went downhill quickly. And again, the crime took place in July of 2012. James began experiencing a disconnection from reality. He started openly expressing feelings of detachment from the real world, and his paranoid thoughts began to intensify. He also stopped caring about school so much, which was very out of character for him. He did get into a relationship, but that ended, and that breakup hit him really hard. It was actually that ex-girlfriend who suggested that James seek mental health help from the campus student wellness center because she could tell that he needed it. And in March of 2012 at the University of Colorado, James had his first appointment for his mental state with psychiatrist Dr. Leanne Fenton at the student health clinic shortly after his breakup. He met with her a total of 7 times over a 3-month period, and that psychiatrist expressed concerns about his social anxiety and his, quote, psychotic level thinking. It was her belief that he could have schizoid personality disorder. It sounds like the school clinic wanted to work with him, but he was more so refusing treatment. And then in June of 2012, a month before the crime took place, he dropped out completely. And come to find out, well, first, on July 8th, which was one day after he bought tickets for the movie, James texted a girl, a classmate that he took a liking towards or whatever, he kind of liked her a little bit. He texted her and said, quote, "The floodgates are open. It's in your best interest to avoid me. I'm bad news bears," unquote. But even crazier than that was a phone call. The night of, right before he entered the movie theater, just after midnight, James called the University of Colorado Denver Student Mental Health Emergency Hotline. He told investigators that he called as one last chance to turn back and not do what he was about to do, but the phone rang for around 9 seconds and he didn't hear anything, so he hung up and he walked in. Ultimately, on July 16th of 2015, after 11 weeks of a trial and over 12 hours of the jury deliberating, James Holmes was found guilty of 24 counts, 2 counts for each of the 12 victims that did not make it. He was also found guilty of 140 counts for the 70 people who were injured, on top of the other counts for having not only the weapons that he bought, but also the weapons that he made himself. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole and an additional 3,318 years. His parents were both in shock when they heard what their son did, both saying that if you had told them that this would have ever happened to their family, they would have never believed it. His mother saying, quote, "Not in your wildest dreams would you think that your son would strangers. For someone who loved kids and dogs and always did his homework and his chores, you can't believe it is possible for someone to cause that much harm, let alone the man that you raised," end quote. And finally, I want to end this video by remembering the victims who did not make it. 26-year-old Jonathan, 18-year-old Alexander, 29-year-old Jesse, 51-year-old Gordon, 24-year-old Jessica, 27-year-old John, 27-year-old Matthew, 23-year-old Michaela, 6-year-old Veronica, 27-year-old Alex, 24-year-old Alexander, and 32-year-old Rebecca. This one was tough. I heard some of the victims talking about what it was like to be in that movie theater. and I'm not going to be able to get that out of my head for a very, very long time. But that is all from me today. Thank you guys for sticking around. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, be kind to people, hug your loved ones, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.